We're here with our friend, Congressman Chip Roy of Texas. Chip, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing great. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing okay. So tonight's the big night. You're going to be sitting among clowns with the President of the United States is speaking. You know, Chip, you and I, we both remember when Congress conducted itself with some level of decorum, where there was some level of respect. Pelosi really was in the main one to blow that up, ripping up the speech of Donald Trump in the first term. And so they're trying to figure out what to wear, what signs to bring, and so forth. And so this is really pathetic, is it not?
No, it is. I mean, and look, I'm actually writing right off the House floor right now. I'm getting ready to walk my guest, who I'll just say right now is Chris Olivares, who's a lieutenant with the Texas Department of Public Safety, and I'm walking him upstairs, and we're all kind of sitting back going, what are the Democrats going to do? What spectacle are they going to make? You know, they've done their silly pantsuits before, but what are we going to get in terms of disturbing the ceremony, disturbing the proceedings? Look, you can applaud, you can sit quiet, but we should actually just do our part and listen and let the president give a speech. If you like it, applaud. If you don't, sit quiet. But you can count on them doing something. Remember they've broken out flags for other countries before.
Yeah.
They've done all the stuff they can do to disrupt. So we'll see what they do. I'm going to just stay focused and intently listening to the president's speech.
Make sure you give all my friends there a hello. I know I'm widely loved among Republicans and Democrats, so make sure you tell them hello for me.
You are well loved, certainly among my conservative brothers and sisters.
I wanted to ask you this. I think the president may. It depends. We've had conflicting reporting, first from Reuters, then from Fox. He may be talking about this minerals deal, and maybe he would have pulled this off in time. I mean, actually, I think that minerals deal is absolute genius, don't you?
I do, and it's what should have happened on Friday if Zelensky hadn't basically stepped into his celebrity arrogance, in which he, blew up the deal. The president was prepared to go make a deal, and I think this would put America... And by
the way, the Democrats told him to do that. Chris Murphy.
Yes, sure. And I'm sure Susan Rice was involved too, right? And so, they're trying to do that to tank it, but what the president was doing was really smart, which is to set America up to have a good deal where we can get minerals but also be a part of Ukraine, which would make us have a vested interest in their future.
Exactly.
It's smart. And we do want to have a vested interest in their future, but Zelensky couldn't help himself, right? So he comes in, he's arrogant, he's kind of, Mr. Front Page of the magazine, and it challenges the president right there in the Oval Office. I couldn't even believe it. But I got to tell you, the president's reaction, JD's reaction, some of the greatest stuff I've ever seen on live television. And now,
see, I don't agree with you. I didn't like it. It's not our fault. Don't get me wrong. And I know some people are all excited about it. I looked at it and I said, no, I don't really like this. I don't really know what we could have done, the president and JD, in response to it, but I don't like it. I do like the fact... Yeah, go ahead.
No, my counter to that would be, it's important to reset the relationship and the tone. Like Zelensky.
I'm sorry, you don't do that in front of our enemies. I don't believe in that.
Well, okay, but here's the difference, though. So what happened when Zelensky pushed the buttons and JD and the president pushed back? They listened. They gave him like 2 or 3 off ramps. He didn't take it, and by resetting it,
I'm not disagreeing with you, but you're saying you're glad it happened. I'm not glad it happened.
Well, let me state it this way. I think it was important for the world to see what has been happening, where Zelensky was coming and expectantly getting stuff out of Biden and his cronies, as opposed to a smart, strong administration, who, by the way...
let me try it this way. What do you think Xi saw?
Say that again, sorry?
What do you think Xi saw?
I think Xi saw a strong and powerful president who isn't going to take crap, but who understands relationships and understands that, hey, that guy's going to go work a deal. He knows, like, at the end of this day, he's going to still go work the minerals deal, and he's still going to go push back and get us in a stronger position with Putin. He's going to open up American energy.
I agree with all that. That's not my question. What do you think Xi took from that public event?
I still think...
Do you think he's more likely to invade Taiwan or less?
I think potentially less. I mean, I know we can disagree on this, but I think watching a president who is strong enough to say, I'm not going to have someone come into my Oval Office and push me around, I think Xi's going to look at that and go, this is a guy that doesn't give a crap, and on the world stage, knowing precisely the way you are, I think, properly kind of looking at that, interpreting it, he's like, he did it anyway. In other words, I think it's going to inure to his benefit, our benefit, and frankly, probably Ukraine's benefit. And I think she's going to go, crap, this guy's smart, and I can't just march into Taiwan. But maybe I'm wrong.
He is going to just march into Taiwan. There's not a hell of a lot we're prepared to do about it. That's my prediction to you. Now, that said, I think what saved all this was what happened after the meeting. That is, Trump laid down the law. He made it abundantly clear, you're done. Then he put the screws on one more with the withholding of weapons, at least temporarily. And as I posted, I said, Mr. Zelensky, you better pay attention. That's your last lifeline that Trump's throwing you. That is, he's explaining to you. And it's working, yes. And so I agree with you there.
Well, and I think we'll see that it's working, and we'll be able to. Well, and we'll see, right? I mean, I don't want to get ahead of things. Hopefully what we're going to hear is that there's some movement on the minerals deal, that we've reestablished kind of an ongoing relationship that's appropriate. And look, I agree with the president. Let's have a ceasefire. Let's work out and reposition, because Biden had so badly screwed it up that we were not in a strong position. Like, president inherited a mess. When I was on CNN last night, Caitlin Collins wanted me to say, who started this war? It was Putin. Well, yeah, but it was Joe Biden that started the war because he's incompetent and because he empowered Putin.
My friend Chip Roy, why do the Democrats love bloat, waste, abuse? They haven't spoken up once in support of these efforts to uncover this government within a government. Why is that, Chip Roy?
Well, because they live off it and they thrive off of it, right? I mean, I could go down 1,000 different paths on it, but everything from the USAID with the $32,000 transgender comic book to Peru and 70. Go down the list, right? People.
Wait a minute, I haven't seen that comic book.
Yeah, that was one $32,000 transgender comic book in Peru.
God.
Yeah. I mean, and there's dozens, hundreds of these examples that we're now uncovering. We have people who weren't going to work. We had empty buildings. And you and I knew this sort of intuitively. I knew it somewhat directly. I put out papers and reports outlining it, but we couldn't get enough traction. And God bless Trump and Elon and these guys for exposing it. But to answer your question, Democrats thrive on this, whether it's tyrannical empowerment of a weaponized government, whether it's woke ideology that they're advancing through all of this money, whether it's empowering NGOs to funnel people into the United States to try to transform our electorate, whether it's just, frankly, scamming Medicaid to give money to able-bodied and to give money to California at the expense of other states and the vulnerable, which is exactly what they're doing with the way they game the system. I could go on, but they game the system because big government empowers them, and they view it that way, and they don't want it exposed, and so if it's exposed, it undermines their scam.
It's very well put. And they don't give a damn if 20, 30, 50% of it is fraud, waste, or abuse, as long as the rest of it gets to what they want. Now, let me ask you this. What is California doing to Medicaid?
So this is really fascinating, right? So when Medicaid was set up, and we could talk about the pros and cons of Medicaid at all in terms of how it was providing benefits to even the vulnerable. But that's what it was designed to do. So then it was expanded under Obamacare, but it was expanded on the back end of Obamacare with a higher federal percentage, right? So the Fed percentage was 90% for the Medicaid population that was expanded on Obamacare. So California is now gaming the system by they do a provider tax. So they go get a tax. The state will charge a tax to the hospitals. They'll get all that money. They'll take that money and they'll get a match from the feds at 90%. They'll take that money, add it on top, and then they're able to give that money back to the hospitals in part, and they're able to use that money to game the system, and then they end up with 2, 3, 4 times as much. So you wonder why California has.
All right, hold on. Let's walk through that again. I'm very slow with math. I admit it.
Okay.
So the feds are paying 90%. The feds are paying 90%. The states pay 10% on this. You're saying?
Yeah. So the feds will pay. Yep.
So let me just make sure I understand. So California's charging providers 90%?
No.
And they're taking that 90% and the feds 90%?
Yes. So the provider tax is something that was allowed for in the Obamacare expansion. The provider tax is something that the state can then charge the hospital, collect that money, but then they take that money and then they're sending all of the Medicaid dollars to the feds, and then the feds go, oh, great, we'll give you 90% on that. Now, by the way, For the vulnerable, under traditional Medicaid, it's like 50 to 60%. But on the Obamacare expansion population, which are the much more able-bodied, they get a 90%. So California goes, oh, wait, we can game this, and we'll get a 90% back from the feds, and we'll get a bigger pot of money. Then they take some of that money, get it back to the hospitals, some of that money to then, do the Medicaid benefits, but then they put 5% of it in their general revenue. So they're basically building and accreting their own money to spend on their liberal garbage. They then do it for illegals. They expand it to the able-bodied. So now the poor are left hanging, and California gets twice as much money per Medicaid recipient as we do. Their Medicaid budget, Mark, $117 billion. That is bigger than the entire budget of Florida.
Jeez. And it's unbelievable. They're the ones destroying their precious Medicaid, and they're blaming you guys. Does Medicaid have any role in this budget that you all put together?
Yes. So when we put together the House budget that we passed, we have effectively a reduction in mandatory expenditures, and then we go give instructions to all the committees. Now, we don't mention the word Medicaid anywhere in our budget, but by giving instructions, we're saying, guys, you got to go find savings. So we think you can go find hundreds of billions of dollars in savings in improper payments in Medicaid, in some of these scam expenditures, or by requiring work requirements, all of which have been popular in the past among Democrats and Republicans. But today, of course, Democrats won't work with us. So we think that's important, and we tied that, the spending reductions, along with, by the way, food stamp savings, the student loan fiasco, rewinding a bunch of the Inflation Reduction Act subsidies, and then you can get that money and then have that be riding along with the tax cut extensions, which of course we all want, but we need to get the spending restraint. And so the House, for the first time, Mark, it was a pretty historic move, and it took a lot of work on our part to get there, but we were able to get that through with the House with only losing one vote, and we're going to have to go address some of the mandatory spending. And if we don't do that, we're not going to save the country, Mark. I mean, by the way, what we're doing, it would still be an increase in spending. This is just a reduction in the increase. That's how bad Washington is. Like, our historic budget is still just a reduction in the increase of spending, not actual full cuts.
And what is the main difference between the House and the Senate that we keep hearing about?
So the Senate took the approach of passing the first of two bills because they were going down the road of saying, let's get the border money and some defense money so we can let Pete Hegseth modernize the military, and let's add a few cuts to it, and the debt ceiling. Actually, they didn't do the debt ceiling. Sorry, I wanted to do the debt ceiling. But they did that in a small package, and then they got that out of their committee, and that's what they want to send to us. Well, we, and the Speaker chose and wanted to do a single bill approach, and I think the President leaned that direction. He didn't feel strongly. And so we moved the single bill approach with a lot of, kind of deep work, long hours. And we down the White House, had a long meeting over here, like late night hours, and we got it done. Now, truth be told, Mark, I probably in December, and I publicly preferred the two-bill approach because, like, I just spoke to Tom Homan right outside the House floor, and Tom's telling us, and I'm not breaking news here, but Tom's telling us they got issues coming up pretty soon with bed space, and we've known this. So they got to be able to remove people, and they need bed space and ICE funding to do that. Now, hopefully we can shuffle some dollars around and help them keep doing that, but Congress needs to act, and that was why I liked the two-bill approach. But look, I'm a team player. Let's go figure out how to get this done. They want us to do the one bill. I'll get it done to the best of my ability. But the only thing I won't do is I'm not going to be able to bend down and take a deal if it's going to stiff us on the spending restraint. We have to cut spending because we won't get the inflation tax down for the American people if we don't cut spending.
And how does that look?
Well, I mean, we got, every Republican except for one to move it out of the House. We're still now dealing with the Senate. We're kind of stuck dealing with the, government funding question, the CR or not, which is eating up this week's time. Some of us are going to be meeting with the president soon. I won't say exactly when, but very soon, to go through a lot of this and kind of walk through what we're doing on both the government spending CR question and then reconciliation. The Senate wants permanence on the tax reform, which requires some parliamentary maneuvering. I support permanence, however, some senators want to use the permanency to be able to say they're resetting the way we look at the numbers and the scoring such that we won't have to have, quote, as many cuts. But my response is math is still math. We're either going to have deficits or we're not. We need spending restraint in order to not have deficits. So I'm trying to force that question with my Senate colleagues and friends, but a bunch of them are. A bunch of our friends and mutual friends that you and I know that are solid, guys like Rick Scott and Mike Lee and Ron Johnson and the fighters over in the Senate are all trying to move to make sure we get the spending restraint.
Mike Lee, I don't want to drag you into my world, says we ought to get out of NATO, which is a bonehead idea. I'm sorry, Chip, it just is. Now, let me ask you this.
So, well, no, I'm happy to mention that if you want.
Well, let's do it.
Yeah, no, look, I'm probably between you and sort of some of those guys that are there, but meaning I don't think we should get out of NATO. I think we need a strong alliance to go work with Eastern Europe. And gosh, the trip I took with our good mutual friend Ted and some other mutual friends to Estonia,
Cruz,
to Poland, Ted Cruz, to Estonia, to Poland, to Ukraine. This is all in 2014. Like I saw firsthand, they need us to hold the line. But that being said, a slight agreement with my friend Mike is that for too long, the stupid Europeans have not been doing what they need to do. They've been riding our back while we fund this stuff.
Nobody disagrees with that. In fact, I've gone over their numbers. They're pathetic. And what's interesting is the Balkan states have put up more of their percentage than, say, the leaders with the biggest mouths have put up the least percentage. Britain, France, Germany, and Italy. I don't disagree. But NATO helps us too.
Yeah. Well, and so, Poland, like you said, Poland, those guys, they all, pony up. So what we're seeing here, and we don't disagree. Like, I wish Friday hadn't occurred, but I'm okay with it happening to kind of shine a light on, I think, where Zelensky was getting it wrong. Like, I think he's been too...
Wait a minute, I'm talking about NATO now.
Well, I know, but this is all tied together. That's like part of what these guys are, because they're obviously concerned about Ukraine and NATO. And
Ukraine is not going into NATO. In fact, 10 years ago, hold on now, for the audience. 10 years ago, France and Britain blocked Ukraine from going into NATO. And this minerals deal is better than NATO because America will have a presence, a stake in this, and Trump understands that. The idea that Zelensky didn't understand it is absolutely perplexing to me. But I'm talking about NATO. I have family that fought in World War II. We lost a lot of American lives fighting over that territory. And the idea that we, quote unquote, just pull out of NATO. Donald Trump uses that as leverage to get these guys to pay. We haven't had a commander-in-chief from either party, any philosophy, that really has ever urged the pulling out of NATO. We have 4 bases there. We need those 4 bases there for our protection, among other things. So I just feel when we talk about these things, I don't mean you, but when all of us talk about these things, we need to be a little bit more responsible about what we mean.
So what I would say, putting a bow around this part, is for me, is I do think that the president is charting very wisely what I think you and I both know in talking to Ted Cruz and others that for a decade have thought this, that there's a third way to approaching how we handle our national security. You don't have to be, people just say, oh, you're a hawk, you're a neocon. Well, hold on. I want a strong military through peace, through strength. I want that military to be sparingly used. And when it is used, I want it to be used with overwhelming force, and I want diplomacy to match that. And that's what I want. And that, to me, is like the third way. I think it's the Reagan way. But we've gotten into this neocon horse crud where we end up in endless wars. Or on the other side, the doves who are saying, no, don't get in wars. Like, look, you have to engage in the world, and otherwise we're going to be weaker. And I think this president gets that. And look, I say that. I mean, Mark, I've sparred with the president at times. You've sparred with the president at times. But I love his leadership and what he's doing here. And I think Friday was a pushback, and we can disagree about whether it should happen in public or not. Whatever, it happened, right?
Doesn't matter. It happened.
Pushback. It's kind of like a fastball pitcher who comes in real high and tight with the fastball, brushes him back from the plate, and says, all right, man, now let's get up and let's do this. I think that's what just happened.
Let me put it to you this way. I think Trump's reaction was perfect. I think he's going to get what he needs to get, what we need to get. Yeah. All I'm saying to you is I wish it didn't happen that way, because I think it would have happened anyway. In other words, he would get what he wanted. But my wish is irrelevant because it happened the way it happened. That's just the nature of the beast. Yep. Chip, you're a good man. You're principled. We love you. How are you feeling these days?
I'm feeling good. How about you? I'm knock on wood. I'm healthy and everything seems good. I'm just missing my family right there in Texas, and I'm here too much, but we got a country to save. So
I'm doing great. Thanks, buddy. Keep it up and have a good time tonight. Keep your head down.
All right. Best to your family. God bless you.
You too. God bless you. He and I are old buddies.